One of you guys sent me a message asking me to do a video on super strong masculine men's fragrances. And guess what? That's what I'm doing today. So if you're interested in finding out about these super strong masculine men's fragrances, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yes, today we're talking about super strong masculine fragrances, but these are not targeted all to men. They're unisex targeted, but I find them to be uber strong. Although there are a few fragrances in here that are specifically targeted to men, but the majority of them are unisex. But I find them to be super strong, very masculine offerings, and perfect for a man that's looking for nothing but the most masculine style of fragrance. So why don't we go ahead and get started. We're gonna have, well, I'm not doing this as a ranked list. It's more just options because that's what this person was asking for, just options. And I decided not to rank this particular list because I just wanted to just give you the options for you and you guys can decide. It doesn't always have to be a ranked list. But let's go ahead and get started with the number one, the first one, again not ranked, going to the house of AMOUAGE. It's Portrayal Man. So Portrayal Man to me is a fragrance focusing on violet leaves, and it's super masculine because it's not only the violet leaves, which is ozonic, watery, crisp, crunchy, a bit cucumber-like, definitely a little violet leaf. Well, it's violet leaf is what it is, but there's this kind of like a pulpy experience, but watery, fresh, and ozonic with violet leaves, with a light hint of the actual flower in here. And in here, there's also Vetiver and Juniper berries. So the combination is just nothing but very masculine notes, the Vetiver, Juniper berries. There is definitely an ice cold, crisp experience, not only from the Juniper berries, but as I mentioned, the violet leaves. And that Vetiver adds this earthy woodiness with its light, damp kind of experience with it, that you have this earthiness and kind of like a under the ground kind of experience. To me, this also kind of reminds me of a little bit of Dior Fahrenheit. Very light, no sweetness whatsoever, and also Jeffrey Bean's Grey Flannel. So if you like those fragrances, which both focus on violet leaves, definitely check this one out. Very masculine. AMOUAGE Portrayal Man is the first fragrance I'm going to talk to you about today. The next fragrance I'm going to talk to you about is from the house of JOVOY. It's private label. So recently one of you guys was trying to clarify that it's not JOVOY, it's JOVOY. But I actually asked the owner, and it's JOVOY. Go watch my video, you'll find out more. But JOVOY private label is so masculine. It is very vetiver heavy, really intense vetiver, very damp, very earthy. In this case, we also have smokiness here, and it's dry. So just imagine that dry vetiver, and it's kind of like crinkling. You can experience that dryness, you know, with this particular fragrance. So it's a very dry fragrance experience when it comes to the vetiver. But there are some ambery touches in here, so don't think it's all extremely dry. But it's vetiver, patchouli, papyrus, labdanum, birchwood, sandalwood. There's a little smokiness, there's a little booziness in here, but it's nothing but very intense woody experience, very earthy, and of course it's focusing on these very masculine notes. The vetiver, the patchouli, the papyrus. It's the labdanum that adds a little bit of the ambery touch, and that birchwood as woods and smokiness, a little rubber-like experience, and then that creamy sandalwood. Great scent, private label from the house of JOVOY. The second fragrance I'm talking about. Next fragrance is LONESTAR Memories from the house of Tower Perfumes. This to me is a leather fragrance, but a bit rough and also animalic. Very interesting with this particular fragrance. I feel like it's gotten rough for me. I don't know what has happened. I feel like my nose has changed, but it's gotten more animalic. And when I first discovered it, I didn't really experience the animalic touches. Noses are different. They do different things. But in the background, it's got that kind of new car leather interior experience with kind of like a vintage car rather than a modern car with all the animalic leather surrounding it. That's the kind of fragrance it is. It also has that Tower Oud or the Tower Perfumes DNA that you'll find here and you'll find in L'air du Desert Marocain and a few other fragrances. But this is leather, myrrh, labdanum, vetiver, geranium, ambergris, clary sage, birch, tar, labdanum, jasmine. Yes, there's definitely smokiness here. This is LONESTAR Memories from the house of Tower Perfumes. Moving on to the house of Theo Cabanel. So here's Theo Cabanel's KASAR, this one right here. So KASAR is a male targeted release. And then the only other male targeted release we had was a Portrayal Man. The rest of the fragrances are unisex targeted, and as I said, all are very, very masculine. KASAR, once again, is a very leathery experience, and once again, animalic. It's very, very intense, very long lasting. It's leather, oud, labdanum, cedar, saffron, nutmeg, patchouli, musk, cinnamon. So there's definitely a musky experience here, lots of woods, an animalic leather experience, and then of course the oud is here as well. There's definitely some bright, warm, spice in here of the cinnamon, and of course the musk. It creates this very, very nuclear kind of an experience, very, very intense, very masculine, and also animalic. So KASAR from the house of CABANEL. Do you guys know that brand? And do you know that fragrance? Moving on to the house of TIZIANA TERENZI, it is LAUDANO NERO. So black labdanum is I think what this stands for. To me, this smells very smoky and ashy. And also, there's light booziness in the background, which creates for a brightness against all this darkness. It's tobacco. And a lot of people say it reminds them of Black Afghano. I think there is a Black Afghano-esque experience here. I don't get ashy from Black Afghano, I get ashy from this. I also get a much bigger experience in this particular fragrance in comparison to the Black Afghano. So I prefer this one over the other. And I do find differences and light similarities as well. But it's incense, cognac, oud, tobacco, amber, labdanum, ash, oak, honey. The honey adds the sweetness, the cognac adds the sweetness, a little booziness, but it's all very dark and smoky and ashy. It's a beautiful, like if you've ever smelled a place that's ever burned down, you know how it smells kind of not the best? This smells like beautifully burned fire. I don't know if that makes sense, because there's ash and smoke in here, but I don't know what it is, but they've kind of like softened it up and made it smell a little beautiful, not dirty, if that makes sense. So TIZIANA TERENZI, LAUDANO NERO, and that's the 5th fragrance I'm talking about today. Again, this is not a ranked list. All right. Moving on to the house of ETAT LIBRE d'Orange, another intense fragrance. This is RIEN, Intense, Incense. This, to me, I think, personally to me, it pays tribute to 80s powerhouses, maybe the late 70s and early 80s powerhouses. To me, it reminds me of fragrances like Kouros and also something like Antaeus from Chanel. But in a more modern way, very, very intense. If you like those fragrances, I highly recommend you try these fragrances. But it's also very, very strong, intense, overwhelming, animalic, smoky, leathery. It's incense, leather, aldehydes, oak moss, labdanum, patchouli, amber, cumin, black pepper. For me, the aldehydes are key here. It makes for appreciating the darkness of this fragrance a little lighter, not as heavy and dense. You know, some things get really heavy and fall down. That aldehydes note that's in here adds a little bit of a lightness, so it's not necessarily weighing it down kind of an experience, but it is a very dark fragrance experience, a very dark fragrance to wear. So it's ETAT LIBRE d'Orange, RIEN, Intense, Incense, great scent. Moving on to the house of Frederic Malle, it's Monsieur, this one right here. So this one, to me, is an oily patchouli, and when I say oily, I'm talking about motor oil, kind of a mechanic digging into the front of the car and fixing and repairing and kind of a smell with patchouli, if that makes sense. So this is supposedly it was like the male answer to Portrait of a Lady. Yes and no, but it is definitely kind of like that oily, greasy kind of a patchouli experience. So patchouli, incense, rum, cedar, amber, musk, vanilla, tangerine. There's definitely booziness here. There's definitely some brightness as well. There's lots of woods and amber, but to me, as I said, the incense and patchouli together creates for the motor oil kind of a feel. So if you like the idea of if you ever open up your car and you're repairing it and fixing it and putting motor oil and replacing whatever the heck it is that you need to replace, if you like that smell there, to me that's what this smells like. But it's a very, very industrial smelling patchouli fragrance. Anyway, Monsieur from the house of Frederic Malle, very, very strong. It's super strong, masculine men's fragrance. I think that is specifically targeted to the men, now that I think about it. Moving on to the next fragrance, going to the house of Maître Parfumé Gantier. This is Route de Vetiver, this one right here. To me, this one, if you take JOVOY's private label. Remove the patchouli and you're left with nothing but the vetiver, kind of like an industrial strength vetiver. Very earthy, very strong, very pungent, very damp, going towards the moldiness, but you're digging way down, deep down into earth and smelling the earth with its roots. That's the kind of vetiver this fragrance is. It's also very, very masculine, as I've been saying, all these fragrances are, and also very, very long lasting. But this is vetiver, woods, sandalwood, musk, jasmine, green notes, blackcurrant. Yeah, there's a little floral touch. Yeah, there's even a little less of a fruitiness in here. But this is like vetiver in your face. If you appreciate vetiver, you want nothing but vetiver, definitely try root de vetiver. And I'm not talking about root as in the route I was saying. This is root as in the route to, or the road to the vetiver. So that's at number 3 from the house of Maître Parfum Gantier, root de vetiver. Moving on to the house of Parfums de Nicolai, my brand new bottle of New York Intense, this one right here. I went through my 30 ml, and well, I didn't run through it. I have a little left, which I'm going to take on a trip to Europe when I leave. I took it home, and I bought another bottle of it here. This, to me, is a very masculine fragrance, kind of reminiscent to Bois de Portugal from the house of Creed, but I think the Nicolai is a little better than the Creed. It's a little more oomphier, like it's intense. And also, next to all these fragrances, I think it might be a little lighter, but still, I think it's super strong and very, very masculine, male-targeted. This is not a male-targeted release, but definitely it comes off like a male-targeted release, especially if you put it next to the Bois de Portugal, which is a male-targeted release. So this one is oak moss, bergamot, lavender, citron, black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, civet, castoreum, vanilla, and incense. A lot of unique notes, but it's lots of oak moss, it's lots of woods, there's lots of spices. It does have a classic kind of a vibe, maybe a bit 70s and 80s kind of an experience, but it's quite delicious. New York Intense, it's very, very masculine, super strong and very masculine offering from the house of Parfums de Nicolai. And then finally, the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about today is Mancera's Red Tobacco. Super, super strong, very, very masculine tobacco fragrance from the house of Mancera. It's a unisex targeted release, but to me it acts very masculine. There's little sweetness in here, but there's lots of roughness around it to kind of like tone down the sweetness. It's a sweet tobacco kind of an experience. Tobacco, vanilla, amber, patchouli, cinnamon, oud, saffron, green apple, incense, peach, nutmeg, jasmine. A lot of stuff going on here. It's uber complex, very, very complex wear, but lots of tobacco, and then that vanillic notes comes in, and it has a kind of a, I was explaining about the Missio from Frederic Malle. It has a little bit of that kind of like greasy motor oil like roughness here blended with all of the notes, where you have all those notes, but they decided to add this additional note of this greasiness, kind of like motor oil like roughness, to make the fragrance more, you know, rough around the edges kind of a thing. It's a long-lasting fragrance and very, very masculine. Super strong masculine fragrance. Mancera Red Tobacco. That is the last fragrance for you guys today. Anyway, guys, those are all niche fragrances. I wanted to focus on niche, and I wanted to highlight this particular style. If you're looking for a super strong masculine offering, masculine fragrance, definitely check these out. Even though, as I said, some of them are unisex leaning, they're very, very masculine leaning. Not unisex leaning, unisex released, very masculine leaning. If you have another favorite super strong masculine fragrance, not a designer, please keep it niche today. Do let me know. I know designers are always broken down into men's fragrances and feminine or women's fragrances, and they're also, to me, not uber strong. They're not really strong fragrances, but I'm trying to focus on the stuff that's really, really strong. And these fragrances are really super, super strong. So if you know of any, do let me know. Put a comment down. I'd like to find out. But other than that, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please do list below. Please like this video, please share it, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. So I am offering up one more fragrance, and this is kind of that technicality. Is it a designer? Is it a niche house? It's kind of in between. It's Guerlain's Bois Mysterio, this one right here. Had to have this one in the mix because it is super, super strong. It's also slightly animalic, more sweaty, musky rather than animalic. but it's also very, very leathery. There's aromatics and green notes, you know, thrown in the mix as well, and lots of woods. It's myrrh, leather, cedar, cumin, bay laurel, patchouli, neroli, and jasmine. Very, very sexy. If you like cumin and you like the idea of a little bit of a roughness and you like that leathery experience, a leathery touch, definitely try. This is Bois Mysterio from the House of Guerlain. In their the collection, I'm drawing a blank with the collection now. This also used to be called something else, and then they killed that collection and brought them into this collection. Drawing a blank with those names. But if you're looking for super strong masculine men's fragrances, definitely try this one. This is Guerlain Bois Mysterio. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for another video tomorrow. Bye-bye.